the Parks and Recreation and Intergenerational Services Commission to order. Commission Clerk, would you read the roll?
Thank you. Chair Sandoval, Vice Chair Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Ahmad.
Present.
Commissioner Eckler. Commissioner Hargrove.
Here.
Commissioner Jans.
Here.
Commissioner Price.
Here.
And alternate member Horowitz was not required to attend. We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. As you see, Chair Sandoval is not with us today, so I am chairing the meeting as Vice Chair with the capable assistance of the Commission Clerk to help us through this. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N29-20, members of the West Sacramento Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission and staff will participate in this meeting via a teleconference. To reduce the spread of COVID-19, members of the public are asked to watch the meeting telecast on Wave Cable Channel 20 and to have submitted comments in writing by 5 p.m. on September 1st. This is a special meeting of the PRIS Commission scheduled by staff at the request of the City Council in order to facilitate a timely workshop discussion on the science risks associated with outdoor recreation activities during COVID-19. Tonight we have with us for the workshop Mayor Cabaldon, whom we expect to join us shortly, and Mayor Pro Tem Sandeen, who serve as the City Council's COVID-19 subcommittee. We also have Dr. Larissa May, Yolo County's interim health officer, joining us for the discussion. Mayor Pro Tem Sandeen, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Certainly. Thank you, Vice Chair Reed, and thank you to commissioners for including us and staff for including us this evening. As Vice Chair Reed mentioned, the mayor and I we meet weekly and we go over COVID-related issues that are affecting the city. And we've been reporting back to council and working with the city manager. And so I think in order to facilitate a way in which we can be efficient with time and also hear from the commissioners with regard to outdoor spaces and trails and parks, we were hoping that we could spend some time with you tonight and hear from Dr. May and get some guidance and advice from her. So thank you for including us this evening. And I'm sure we'll be asking questions along with you when we get to that part of the agenda.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to proceed next to the agenda. Commission Clerk, do we have any requests for public comment on matters not on the agenda this evening?
We have not received any public comments.
Fine, and I see Mayor Cabaldon is joining us. I'll give him a minute to become audible. Meanwhile, may I have a motion to approve the minutes for August 4th, 2020 that is on the consent agenda?
Thank you. Vice Chair Reed, actually, we will first ask if there are any commissioner communications for item 1C.
Thank you so much. Do we have commissioner communications? Anything? Anybody up to anything? Okay. So now I will ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes for our August 4th, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
And a second. Make sure you're unmuted so the clerk knows who our second is.
Make a second. Sorry. Couldn't get myself unmuted fast enough.
That's okay. I have the same problem. And Commission Clerk, will you call the roll on the motion?
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Reed?
Aye.
Commissioner Ahmad?
Aye.
Commissioner Jans? I think you're muted, Commissioner Jans.
You're muted.
Aye.
Thank you. And the motion.
And motion carries, Commissioner Clerk?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Thank you. I note that Mayor Cabalden has joined us. Before we begin the workshop, Mayor Cabalden, do you have any comments or greetings for the commission?
Sure. Has Mayor Pro Tem Sandine already said a word?
She did. She introduced the subcommittee and told us what you've been up to.
All right. Well, I may just leave it at that. I do want to thank you for participating this evening, and to our staff for arranging this. Our objective tonight was really to get to level set on the latest in terms of science and the regulatory activity. Although I know the staff report is framed in terms of recommendations, we're not in the mode right now of commission action or city council action on the issues that are before us, but simply to make sure that the key policy leaders in the community that have responsibilities here all have similar understanding and shared understanding of some of the key trends in science and regulation. So thanks for participating in this evening. And I know Mayor Pro Tem Sandine and I both are looking forward to a productive workshop.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn this over to our director, Tracy. And would you like to take it from here and introduce our guest as well?
I will. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see that okay?
Wonderful.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Vice Chair Reed and members of the commission, also Mayor Cabalden, Mayor Pro Tem Sandine. This is a special workshop item requested by the City Council on the science and risk of outdoor recreation activities during this unprecedented time. I am excited to be joined this evening by Dr. Larissa May, Yolo County's Interim Health Officer, and together we will walk through a presentation of information related to the public health order and how we've addressed outdoor recreation to date, and then invite discussion questions about how we might move forward to create that balance between outdoor recreation activities and also practicing safety precautions, both of which are really critical for our community now. We also have several Parks and Recreation staff participating in this meeting. So as questions come up, they're the experts. They'll be able to help answer questions and engage in discussion as well. Going back to March of 2020, when we had our initial shelter-in-place order, we were all asked to stay home unless we needed to leave for essential activities. This was to slow the spread of COVID-19, protect those most vulnerable to the disease, and then also preserve local healthcare capacity. Essential activities did include engaging in outdoor activity, this as long as we could comply with social distance requirements. The health order wasn't very specific about the types of outdoor activities that were allowed, but it did list examples such as walking, hiking, or running. Social distancing was defined as being able to maintain at least 6 feet of space from other individuals, washing hands with soap and water frequently, or being able to use hand sanitizer, and also regular cleaning of high-touch surfaces. These social distancing requirements are key for us in Parks and Rec as we look at our overall recreation system and our ability to comply with these requirements to ensure the safety of both our employees and our patrons. So just as a reference, we have a very robust Parks and Recreation system. We have a number of amenities that are housed within our parks and our recreation center. And as we prepare to implement social distancing protocols in our facilities, we had to consider the number and location of the facilities and also the resources needed to achieve compliance. At that time, we thought this was only going to be a few weeks. So this table is a summary of the progression of our facilities since mid-March and how they have been adjusted over time. Initially, we didn't close very many amenities, but instead we ramped up our cleaning and disinfecting efforts, including play equipment, our restrooms, and our picnic areas. And then we were also closely monitoring how our facilities were used. Some of the exceptions were athletic fields, because at that time we were getting ready to open Memorial Park, and athletic leagues, including Little League, had already made decisions to stop practices and delay their seasons. And so we tracked along with that. Our splash pad was already closed. It's only open seasonally. And so we just planned to let it remain closed until we received new information. As the public health order was extended and modified, we made adjustments and closed more amenities. Most of the closures focused on equipment, specific amenities where social distancing was difficult to maintain, primarily just due to the nature of the activity. We noted these closures through signage on site. We used the city's website and social media platforms. There was some inconsistency between jurisdictions, and so we set up weekly meetings with Parks and Recreation organization administrators so that we could better coordinate how we were managing our facilities. For the Recreation Center, we treated that facility a little different. Even though we have outdoor amenities because they're part of a larger complex, we just closed everything. And we switched immediately to a virtual platform where we have now over 600 participants and a Facebook group where we offer virtual classes. In the last 5 months, we've had over 85 fitness classes offered virtually, 2 virtual fitness challenges, over 200 people participating in our virtual Junior Giants program. And this doesn't include all of the other programming we're doing with adaptive recreation or active aging. And if you have some time, you can check out the Arts Commission video on our website from last night's meeting where Connie Leek provided a great overview of everything we've been doing virtually over the last 5 months. But we are very cautious with the rec center. We only recently reopened our lap swim and our tennis courts, those 2 outdoor activities. I want to talk for just a moment about park maintenance protocols. As I mentioned, we thought the initial public health order was only going to last for a few weeks. And so we really ramped up our cleaning and disinfecting. But 2 weeks in, we had to pull back so that we could properly implement social distancing, even within our own for our own employees. We continued to have contractors work for tree maintenance, for street landscaping maintenance, and we did decide to move forward and use the goats who are critical for vegetation management. We had some concerns that the goats would draw a crowd. They typically do. So we got creative with the signage and people seemed to be very respectful and maintain social distancing while enjoying the goats. We eventually brought back all of our maintenance staff so that we could catch up on maintenance requirements. They're all working 5 days a week with staggered shifts, appropriate PPE and vehicle and equipment disinfecting. But as we continue to evaluate the status of our facilities, we want to make sure we're considering the safety of our employees and our ability as an organization to implement some of the safety protocols. Some of them are time consuming, some of them can become expensive, and they may not be practical in the long term. So I'd like to actually invite Dr. May to speak about some of the items that we take into consideration for facilities being reopened or activities being reopened.
Thank you, Tracy. So, there isn't a lot of evidence out there since the beginning of this pandemic really related to outdoor activities, but some things to consider when thinking about the SARS coronavirus is there are some risk-based strategies. So some items that we might consider is duration of exposure, physical distancing opportunities, as well as being outdoors versus indoors. So in this case, we're talking about reopening outdoor activities. So some items specifically that we've thought about are, where is the activity taking place? So is the space that the activity is taking place in large enough to accommodate the physical distancing that's recommended? How many people are engaged in the activity? Clearly, the smaller the group, the better. The duration of the activity. So shorter durations are preferred, especially if people are going to be coming closer to each other than the recommended 6 feet. Use of shared equipment. So ideally, we would want to avoid sharing equipment, even though we do know most recently that contact is not thought to be the major source of spread of the COVID-19. It is more likely related to people coming close together and droplets and aerosols than actual fomites, which are the surfaces that people may touch. And then finally, can surfaces be reasonably cleaned in between different groups that are using them? I'll turn it back over to you, Tracy.
Thank you. Yes. So This is a comparison table that's also included in your agenda report of the status of some of the key facilities in our region and even across the country. As I mentioned in the report, there is a biweekly survey conducted by the National Recreation and Parks Association to understand how parks and recreation organizations are managing their facilities. The percentages indicate that percentage of the facility that is open fully or even partially open with some restrictions. So what you can see is that we generally track with what organizations are doing. There are some variances. Oftentimes those variances are highly dependent on the location, on how that facility is used. For example, we have a skate park that has remained open for the entire duration of the public health order. And that's because it's relatively small. It's not heavily used, and we haven't seen any issues with social distancing being maintained. And most of the people there are in movement all of the time, as compared to Sacramento, that has a very large skate park that draws large crowds, and they made the decision to keep it closed. So what Dr. May and I are going to do is walk through a few of the activities that tend to be the ones we get the most questions on. The public health order isn't very specific when it comes to outdoor recreation activities. So there's a lot of room for interpretation and discretion with how you might treat some of these amenities. So we've highlighted a few of those that we think will probably be the trigger of most of our discussion, starting with playgrounds. So the current state public health order recommends that playgrounds be closed. The risk with reopening, we think, is higher. I'll let Dr. May speak to that a little bit based on some of the science and the guidelines.
Yeah, so I think, again, it's not so much the contact, although that is an issue where you're not able to clean surfaces between children, but it's the fact that young children are naturally going to congregate with each other. And especially in those younger age groups, we're going to assume that most of them are not going to be wearing face coverings. It's going to be difficult for them to maintain social distancing. They're not only going to be playing on the structures and touching the structures, but they may be touching each other. And then that may lead to them touching their eyes, their nose, or their mouth and contaminating themselves with viral particles. Another consideration here is it's difficult to keep playground surfaces clean and disinfected. And in order to do it adequately, cleaning would be expensive, time-consuming, and temporary, and you'd actually have to keep kids off the structures to allow, for example, the disinfectant to dry. So this is why most jurisdictions do not have their playgrounds open, although some do. One can debate the risk with reopening, maybe somewhere between moderate and high, but it's more related to being able to maintain physical distancing, which is very difficult with young children.
Restrooms is another amenity that we get a lot of questions on. It's not specified in the current public health order how to treat restrooms. However, CDC encourages that restrooms that are located in parks that are open and available for public use also be open. The risk can be low to moderate depending on the ability to maintain the restrooms. And I think that we want to encourage people to be outside. When people need to go, they need to go. And Dr. May, I know you can chime in here, but by not having restrooms open, you have the potential to create other public health issues. I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so certainly, if you have an open outdoor space and there's no place for people to use restrooms, I know some of the Lake Tahoe beaches had similar issues where they were open, but their restrooms were closed. And, what you're doing is essentially, you may be encouraging squatters or people are going to be, using the restroom essentially outdoors, which is potentially going to lead to other problems. So as long as they can be regularly cleaned and disinfected and stocked with supplies, you can maintain hand washing and hand sanitizing. The risk here may be low to moderate, particularly because we know, flushing for regular restrooms may actually aerosolize the virus, but it may be less of a risk, for example, with porta potties and other such structures. So the challenge here is, is there the adequate staff to maintain supplies and to clean? Typically you'd have to do that multiple times a day, realistically, if because the surfaces will become contaminated pretty quickly.
in West Sacramento, our experience with restrooms has been that it is difficult to maintain supplies as soon as we restock. Sometimes within the hour, the supplies are gone, and the surfaces can become contaminated quickly. But there are some things that we could consider doing, like focusing on key restrooms. Maybe we don't open all of them. We have 8 of them citywide. Maybe we target a few to be reopened, and then we can have more frequent cleaning. So definitely something that I'm sure will come up during our discussion. Athletic fields. So we were a little surprised that the public health order actually recommended that it could be open for conditioning only. The risk with reopening is can be moderate to high depending on whether or not groups are complying with the guidelines that have been provided. As soon as the public health order indicated athletic fields, youth sports could resume for conditioning purposes, we saw our play fields being used a lot, not by local groups, by non-local groups. And so we tried to be proactive and encourage our groups to go through our permitting process so that our staff could educate the leagues or the teams on the proper protocols, and also to make sure that they were reserving the field space and that they had insurance and all of the things that we like to try to have in place anyway under normal circumstances. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Dr. May.
Yeah, I think again, the risk here is with physical distancing. We also have to remember, even outdoors, if people are yelling or coming up close to each other, heavy breathing, we don't really know the safe space, at which point, obviously being outdoors is less of a risk than being indoors. So that's the reason for no games or tournaments. But, the question is compliance with the recommended face coverings, et cetera. And, it's difficult to enforce those guidelines. And so, the city permit process is helping with that. But this is one that needs to be watched carefully, especially as other, things may reopen in the future. You can go on to the next one.
Yeah, outdoor group exercise classes. We have seen a number of groups starting to have classes in our parks. The current public health order does indicate that fitness facilities can move their business outside and conduct outdoor activities. And so the outdoor group exercise classes in parks sort of aligns with that type of use and that health order finding. The risk with reopening, we think, is relatively low. There are guidelines in place in order to reduce risk, tracking participant attendance, taking temperatures, face coverings required before and after class, no sharing of equipment, cleaning and disinfecting the equipment. It is a little bit difficult to enforce the guidelines, but it's easier for these types of activities than it is for the athletic field use, quite frankly. I ask everybody who inquires about using a park space for outdoor group exercise classes to submit a proposal to the county. We don't have a formal permit process for that type of activity in our parks, other than going through the traditional rental or special event process, which is a little overkill for that type of activity. So they've submitted proposals to the county and received feedback and approval from the county. And that process has seemed to help in making sure that these organizations are educated on the practices they need to adhere to. And we have staff that kind of spot check the classes. We have a master schedule of classes that are taking place in parks. Now, there are classes that happen that we don't know about. Not everybody comes to us and asks for permission to use our parks. So we try to do our best to catch those folks too and educate them on the process. Anything to add, Dr. May, to this one?
No, I think this is similar to the outdoor activities that are happening in fitness centers. I'm not aware of any outbreaks that have been related to any of this. It seems that, these organized group activities versus sort of the, people coming together informally, it seems like people would be more likely to actually distance from each other. Nothing else to add there.
Outdoor courts. So this includes basketball, tennis, and pickleball, and it isn't directly specified in the public health order, but we've seen jurisdictions opening up their tennis courts, as early as May. Again, we delayed our tennis court opening because it was part of the rec center, but we did monitor our basketball courts. And basketball is challenging because it's very much a contact sport. It's very difficult to maintain social distancing and almost impossible to avoid having multiple people touch the basketball. And while an individual can go out by themselves to practice drills, in reality, pickup games, and we've even seen unauthorized tournaments taking place in our courts. And based on our experience with witnessing those types of activities, we removed the basketball rooms to discourage use. For tennis, pickleball, players can more easily maintain that social distancing, especially when it's singles play only, which is what we're allowing at our rec center. Equipment, people can bring their own equipment. And because right now, the only pickleball and tennis that's happening is at our rec center, we have staff available to monitor the activity to make sure that all of the safety guidelines are being implemented. Right now, since we've reopened the rec center, we've had the unfortunate sequence of events of high temperatures and poor air quality, which has limited some of our outdoor tennis activities. But we have had a few people play pickleball. And if anybody's interested in playing pickleball at Bright Park, our newer sports court can accommodate that activity as well.
Yeah, so most experts think that tennis is one of the lowest risk sports that one can play, especially outdoors, just because, especially as you mentioned in singles, people aren't coming into close contact with each other. They're on opposite sides of the net. We know that tennis ball is, has some surface area, but, it's not being metal, it's relatively lower risk and you tend to not contact it as much. And so, whereas basketball, I think, becomes more challenging again because the proximity of the players to each other who, are breathing heavily, multiple people coming into contact, not really necessarily just with the basketball, but with each other. And just the nature, perhaps of who plays basketball versus tennis, I don't know. But it seems, that more young adults perhaps will be playing basketball and perhaps less likely to comply with guidance. So coming up with a safe way to play basketball, which is considered a high risk activity, really would require some thinking outside the box, I think.
For swim and aquatics, the current public health order status is that lap swim is permitted. The risk is very low for lap swim. Based on some of the science out there, pool chemicals actually inactivate the virus that causes COVID-19. For us, because our lap swim is located at the rec center, we have a lot of protocols in place and staff to monitor them to make sure that social distancing is maintained. All of our lanes have to be reserved in advance. There is no sharing of equipment. And we've been really happy with the response that we've received from our participants. We have 12 spots per session, and they have routinely, since we reopened, been full. We've had some cancellations because of poor air quality, but other than that, all of the spots are being filled. And we have demand to increase our rec center hours to accommodate more swimmers potentially. And then we also are not open every day of the week at the rec center. We have limited hours for our pass holders. So there is an opportunity to open up swim lanes for swim teams to practice, including our local dolphin swim team, as long as protocols are in place and they're following them. For our splash pad, our leisure pool, and our water slide, there's a lot of challenges with maintaining social distances with those types of uses. They're all seasonal uses for us, so we just never open them up. And this week actually would have been the last week that they would be open anyway. So they've just remained closed, and hopefully they'll be able to be open next season.
So so the evidence suggests that that COVID-19 is not spread through water. So there's been no known cases of being spread through water. So again, the biggest concern is the physical distancing, typically outside of the pool. I know that several, other cities in Yolo County and certainly other local counties are allowing this lap swimming, and also even having some swim teams practice with physical distancing protocols in place. So you have one layer, one swimmer per lane, and even, one on each side. So they may cross each other for a brief minute or seconds in the pool, but I'm aware of no outbreaks related to swimming. So I would consider this a relatively or pretty low risk activity.
I know there's a lot of other activities that we didn't go into detail about. We are happy to answer questions about other types of uses. But in terms of next steps, I just wanted to share what we're still doing on a regular basis to monitor all of our outdoor recreation activities. Hopefully we'll get to a point where we'll have indoor recreation activities as well. But for right now, we continue to have these weekly coordination meetings with Parks and Rec organizations throughout the region. We discuss public health order updates. We discuss lessons learned so that we're implementing best practices as we go through this time of uncertainty, and then also working to make sure that we're using consistent protocols and messaging. We have a city reopening planning team that meets regularly, and we use that team to discuss a variety of reopening protocols and how we might enforce those. We also use it as an opportunity to identify any implementation support we need. So if we need physical improvements made at our facilities to help promote that social distancing, we call on other departments to help us with that. And on an ongoing basis, what we're trying to do is really promote education, enforcement, and constant reevaluation so that we can continue to improve the way that we're doing business under these public health orders as they evolve. And that concludes the presentation portion. I would like to open it up for questions and discussion.
Madam Chair, can I provide just some overall, some additional background in context? As I think the Mayor Pro Tem indicated, she and I are the Council's subcommittee on the management of the emergency. And just to step back to where we were at the beginning of the pandemic in West Sacramento and how Parks and Recreation fits into that picture, it is important to remember that for the first several months of the pandemic, our community was one of the hardest hit in that pandemic. For most of the period of the first couple of months, West Sacramento accounted for more than half of all the cases in Yolo County, and a non-trivial number of the deaths and the hospitalizations. And so we had the same crisis as others, but on a much more intensive scale. And so the efforts that were undertaken immediately to respond and to address that situation led to a fairly aggressive approach. And that's why when you look at Tracy's grid, part of the reason for the differences between cities, even within Yolo County, there are a lot of reasons, but one of them, as an example, is Davis has had a much lower rate of cases and of the medical issues associated with that. So they're able to make choices that we can't legitimately make based on the protection of the safety of our people. So it is partly a question, or it's not totally an issue of, well, what is happening in other cities? Because other cities don't have our risk and case profile or our population profile as a very diverse urban center with a diversity of economic circumstances. We have not seen some of the racial disparities that have been reported in other parts of the state and in the country, but we have with respect to the Latino community in our city that other cities don't have, even in the county. So, as we try to manage the pandemic, part of what we have to do is pay attention very much to our own community and our situation, and every day, as Tracy indicated, monitoring the data and the trends. Because we're looking really, our focus tonight has been mainly on the sort of the medical science, but there's the other science that we pay close attention to is the cognitive science and the group science. right? So if you look to the period of major challenge that we've experienced both in our city and countywide and statewide, after the first week or two of June, when we saw cases explode in our community and elsewhere in California, and a big ramp up in hospitalizations, and now we're at 13 West Sacramentans who have lost their lives due to the virus. If you compare us to other places in the world or even in Northern California, what you don't see are massive changes, massive differences in policy. Right? It's not simply that the situation in Marin or in Santa Clara is different in the sense that perhaps they allow lap swim, but they don't allow tournaments. Right? I think sometimes in the policy world we think that there's one policy intervention or choice that's going to make that happen. But really, it's about the science of how people interpret these signals and the decisions that they make based on this information. Because none of our residents, none of us on a daily basis are carrying around the manual from CDC or from the county or from the state saying, okay, what does the science say today? And we're all struggling with that. I know many of you, the last time you met in person, we were still having a discussion, and the sole recommendation was just wash your hands, And we're learning a lot more. Or early in the pandemic, we thought, well, we don't have to worry about it unless you're an older resident, because it doesn't affect kids and young people. And now we know that isn't true. It's just we don't see the same the symptoms and the implications don't present in the same way. So we're all learning in a dynamic way, and we're all looking for signals. And one of the challenges that occurred in June was changes to our policy and regulatory environment were interpreted by people on a broad scale as meaning that the crisis had passed, that the reopening was it was inevitable, and it was just a question of, is it going to be Thursday or Tuesday that you start to reopen playgrounds and trails, and that it wasn't so much that the policies may not have been right, but the way in which they were seen and perceived and incorporated into people's everyday decisions caused a relaxation that resulted in the cases that we're seeing. So part of what we're paying attention to with all of these issues is what is the sum total of our actions as a city in parks and in other parts of our domain, in conjunction with what the county is doing, what the state is doing. What is it saying to residents about what this situation really is and how careful they need to be? The other dimension is that is also try to, as you all know, because we all use the parks and the activities, is to like play out the rest of the tape in the movie. And so one of the issues about basketball, just as an example, is it may or may not be the case. We don't yet know enough to make a final determination, as Dr. May said. And in those cases, we typically try to defer to the precautionary principle and at least not take unnecessary risk. But the real question is, okay, after the basketball game, do folks all say, hey, why don't you come over to my place and let's have a few beers to relax? Right? If we see that happening in the city, as opposed to folks saying, hey, it was great seeing you all, I'll see you next week. Those are very different cases, and they have different implications. And so as we look at some of these activities where, if you went to get tested, for example, at Club West, you went through Bright Park, it's almost impossible not to see CrossFit, gyms out there using the park and people running and people playing baseball. And we're trying to pay attention, as Tracy said. Well, what's really happening on the ground? Yes, it is possible to maintain appropriate social distance, but are we all actually doing it? And it is important for us to be able to respond to our actual behavior and the signals that are getting sent. So we have tried, because of our risk profile in the city, to take a more aggressive approach, to be very deferential to the changing science, and to be humble about what the science can tell us definitively before we take additional actions, while also recognizing very clearly that outdoor activity, that some sort of interaction with other people is essential to our physical and our mental health as well. And so this, as you've all seen and participated in, trying to communicate simultaneously, please go outside, please stay active, and also follow these ever-changing rules is one of the major challenges that we're dealing with. And it's one of the reasons why we wanted to be with you tonight, to get some shared understanding about particularly the medical side of the science. You all are all experts in to some extent or another about how people actually then apply them out in the world. And what's really happening at the Bridgeway Lakes play structure. are people ripping down the tape and using it anyway, right? So this is one of those areas where our system of citizen commissions and citizen sensing of what's going on in the world is really very, very important. And so this blend of that citizen view of what's happening on the street with the science that Dr. May has been so kind to share with us again tonight is our hope to start to pivot. Having said that, I do want to just reemphasize that the council's expectation is not that tonight, there'll be a motion and a vote to say, 3 weeks from today or 5 hours from now, we're going to open this or close this. But we would like to have a shared understanding of the science as we go forward. Thanks.
You're muted, Vice Chair Reed.
Commissioner Jans, you have a question? You need to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for the presentation and for the input, Dr. May. It was very helpful in understanding kind of what's been happening throughout our city. I share the mayor's thoughts on both the risk and the way I see it as a citizen and a parent, trying to juggle that along with mental health and physical activity. It's certainly challenging for me personally, and the people that I know and talk to, it's challenging for them as well. So I think a lot of us share that concern. The questions that I had about specifically the restrooms, I think that seems to be, from the presentation, the only thing that really may be a viable discussion. The rest of those items that kind of came up, it seems like they were pretty spot on. I mean, it's going to be tough to maintain social distancing playing basketball or flag football or any of those activities. So I had some questions around the bathrooms since they're closed. We said we had 8 restrooms within the city. Part of that was to sanitize and clean them every day. I was curious, what was the protocol prior to COVID? How often were they being cleaned and sanitized and restocked prior to COVID? Is that going to be different than what it would take to reopen them now?
Sam, I'll let you take that one if you want to unmute.
Certainly. So they were cleaned and stocked twice daily in the morning, and then when the afternoon shift came in at 1 o'clock, and then in the evening when they were closed, they were given a light cleaning and not stocked though. So generally twice daily was the protocol. They were not washed out completely in the afternoons due to the fact that you'd have a wet floor. So the thorough cleaning occurred first thing in the morning. The secondary cleaning in the afternoon consisted of just wiping down all of the surfaces with disinfectants. So that was our normal routine. Now, as Tracy mentioned earlier, the products a lot of times, especially in the more remote restrooms or anything near the river, were routinely removed shortly after stocking. It seemed like we had some people that almost knew the schedule of the staffing and arrived shortly thereafter to remove the products. So we've got a situation where, especially if we're looking to provide hand sanitizer, which happens to be a hot item right now, we would have to attach simple double tape devices to the walls, which could be easily removed. So I'm a little concerned about keeping those intact, along with the soap and paper towels, etc. Anyway, we would definitely have to step up that routine. And looking at the restrooms that I would recommend keeping open, I would recommend, if we were to open restrooms, that we would focus on the community parks and like Bright, Alice Norman, the Bridgeway Lakes Park, but I would avoid opening the restrooms in the smaller parks that have limited use, like Linden, Summerfield, etc. And if that were the case, Bright and Alice Norman have personnel on site for the majority of the day. I think that they could probably visit the restrooms every few hours until they were off their shift. And then I have an after hours person that could give them the attention they need. The problem is because the restrooms are so spread out, to have an after hours person visit them on a regular basis, they would have to just move relatively quickly and not be able to give them the attention that they need to get a thorough cleaning. So I would recommend, again, Bright and Alice Norman and then the Bridgeway Lakes, but I would recommend that the other restrooms remain closed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. And what about the boat ramp, the Broderick boat ramp? Are those are bathrooms?
Yes, the Broderick boat ramp restrooms, they are one of the most problematic restrooms that we have in the city. And I do not see the products lasting there more than, an hour at any one time. And also just the use patterns. We don't have a lot of people that utilize those restrooms for the normal purposes. Those restrooms tend to attract undesired activities more so than any of the restrooms in the other parks.
Well, I guess what it comes down to is just judicious view of which restroom is going to be most accommodating to people who are using outdoor activities, maybe on their jogging trail, on their biking trail, people out with kids, all of a sudden they have an immediate need. If every bathroom in West Sacramento is closed, I could see that being potentially a problem. So I guess if it's not going to be, the protocol is not going to be that much different, it sounds like, to clean them for COVID requirements versus what we were doing already, then I would certainly like to be as accommodating as we could be to the citizens of West Sacramento who are trying to get out and be active with their families, with obviously, like I said, through a judicious lens that would be most accommodating with the resources we have and the supplies that we have. That would be something that I personally would like to see if possible. And then I guess when it's being viewed, the activities, just switching gears to just reopening in general. One thing that I try to look at, especially with my commitment to youth sports, is can that activity be modified to meet the needs? So if there's like we see a lot of restaurants doing now, right? Or businesses have modified their procedures to accommodate COVID requirements with distancing and masks and plexiglass and things of that nature. Can the reopening of these facilities, even though it may be indoor or we have groups out parents congregating, can we take measures to maybe keep them distant? Can we modify the event to reopen it? As a parent, I know that my young child is kind of going bananas, run out of a lot of activities to do. So certainly we want to be safe, but at the same time, if there's anything that we can get them involved in, collectively with other kids, but still be safe, we're certainly open to that. So I definitely see a lot of parents struggling to keep their kids active. And there's only so many bike rides and walks and things like that we can go on. And so this, obviously trying not to be impatient, but at the same time, definitely desperate for some sort of organized sports or modified activity that would meet these requirements.
Thank you. And Commissioner Price, you had questions?
Yeah, one thing I can say is that Dr. May, your talk and your expertise on this is appreciated. It's my day job happens to be now, a lot of it is focused on getting office buildings and government facilities, getting them prepared to reopen their offices. So thinking about like everything I've learned through similar meetings for the office workplace or workplaces in general, how much of that mirrors what we're talking about for parks, except we have the added advantage of it being outside. So you start like to really think of all these protocols. It's the distancing, it's the congregation, it's the getting people together, it's the unintended congregation of that activity. I think Mayor Baldwin hit it on the head too, and he mentioned Bridgeway Lake's play structure. It's like there is no tape at Bridgeway Lake's play structure. No one would know it's closed if we didn't tell people it was closed. And it's not really, in my opinion, I'm no expert on this, but it's not really the play structure and the kids bouncing around that's the problem. It's the 10 parents sitting at the one picnic table is the big issue. So it's like, how do we avoid inviting that activity if we open the play structures? So by opening the play structures, we are inviting that activity because there's no way to stop it. So you look at those kind of things. We talked about the basketball. It's not the game itself. It's the people congregating after the game. It's the people watching the game. It's the unauthorized tournaments. It's the going to somebody's house and grabbing a beer. That totally makes sense. Talking the last, one more thing is it's the restrooms. I look at the restrooms and we do talk about this for like break rooms in an office. Like, is the activity that we're allowing worse than the alternative? Or is it better than the alternative? And I look at restrooms as, we talked a lot about, and Sam hit on it, like, well, we're not gonna be able to keep the supplies in there because people are gonna take them. It's like, well, the alternative is not having a bathroom open. And to me, that seems to be worse than having a bathroom open that doesn't have the supplies in it. Because people are going to use the ground as their bathroom, or they're going to do something else, or they're going to, we talk about like you're going to the bathroom or you're going to the park now, you're bringing your own hand sanitizer, or you should be. And then you go into the bathroom because it's open, then that's an added bonus, even if there's no cleaning materials there to take care of it. I mean, yeah, you want it to be taken care of and you want it to be stocked and you want it to be all this, but the alternative being closed, I think, is worse than the alternative being open and not fully supplied. Yeah, we can step up the cleaning as we need to. We can do what we can. But I think the alternative to leaving the restrooms completely closed is worse than having them open and not fully stocked. I think cleaning is important, maybe not as much stocked. I think everything else, everybody already kind of hit on. The singles versus doubles, is that a huge deal? Again, it's the congregation having 4 people on a court. You have people that tend to high five each other on a tennis court. Those kind of things could happen. So yeah, it's like let's bring things along slowly and methodically and make sure we're making the right decisions along the way. And I think we've been doing that so far. So in my view, there's no reason to stop doing what we have been doing and just say, hey, it's a free for all, everybody come on over. So I think we're on the right path. And pretty much all those slides that's with the recommendations, I'm on board with, maybe with the exception of, I think we should have restrooms open, but certainly I'm not the only decision maker in that case too. So thank you.
Director Michael or Dr. May, do you have any response to some of the issues that Commissioner Price raised?
I actually believe Councilmember Sandine has a comment.
Yes, she does. I just was giving Tracy and Dr. May an opportunity to respond to some of Greg's comments.
My apologies.
That's all right. No? Either one? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Sandine.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for including the mayor and me in the discussion this evening and for the presentation. I think want to refer back to some of what the mayor mentioned about the kind of signals that the community gets and when they are entering one of our public spaces. And so to me, I think the thoughtfulness going forward is really important. And that's how we've been all along this way. I want to commend the Parks and Rec team staff and the commission for thinking of some of the complexities that we have to deal with while we're asking people to be healthy and to get out, that we also want them to do that in a really safe way. So to me, some of the signals, for example, when let's say a restroom's open, is it seems like the playground's open. So there's things that I think kind of they go kind of hand in hand. So trying to think through some of those things, when you see a team out on a field engaging in a sport and not necessarily conditioning, when they're actually doing kind of or contact sport, you start to think like, oh, that's, we're back, it's back to normal. And so I really do think that as we're going through this, and we've been thoughtful the whole time, is just to continue that, because right now we haven't seen really the changes in some of our statistics that we're hoping for. And I do think that that approaching this thoughtfully as we are is really important. And just to really think about, and the mayor mentioned and Mr. Price mentioned Bridgeway Lakes, which is my neighborhood, and I go through the park and I'll see the caution tape up for about a minute, and then it's down, and there's big families and so forth. And it's great that people want to use the parks, but it's not great when it's not all in one family, when it's multiple families together. And I just think all the things that we do just have to support the continuation of following the recommendations that are in play at the time. So I don't know that I have any answers. It just really is important that that we continue to be thoughtful, and we are. And I really appreciate the time this evening.
Commissioner Hargrove.
First of all, I want to thank both the mayor and the mayor pro tem and Dr. May for being here and being part of this. This is a really important discussion. I have been trying to be as good as I can all along. My wife is extremely nervous about all of this. I was a little less nervous than her in the beginning, but I have been trying to focus on what the public health protocols are, what the recommendations are. And to tell you the truth, I was pushing very hard when the county was looking to reopen 2 months ago. And I was very happy and excited when the county made the decision to reopen. We hadn't seen a lot of cases at that point, and we were hearing the science was saying we can do this reopening. And what happened? We've now seen this massive pile of cases when you look at the county dashboard, which is unbelievable. And when you drop in arrows at the decision points here, that reopening obviously was premature, and hopefully it's given us some lessons learned on how to reopen again. I know the governor's kind of pulled everything back he's been doing and is now trying to push forward again in a much slower manner. And hopefully we will be able to reopen. But first of all, I want to go way back and just say thank you very much to the Parks and Rec staff. This was crazy when this first happened, and folks didn't know what we could do and what we should do. And communications in the best of times are difficult to a large population of folks. And when the communication was, you can't go out and use our parks, and you can't have your kids use the jungle equipment and the climbing equipment, that's even more difficult. And when the communications was, our beautiful rec center and our pool are not going to be open, they're going to be closed down, that's really tough stuff. And I saw a lot of very pointed, direct, and not happy comments directed towards the elected officials and the staff. So I really appreciate your professionalism that you've done throughout all of this. And I think you've made some good decisions. And I think that, for years, we've been preparing in Northern California for emergencies, floods, earthquakes, fires. Those are the things that we've been preparing for. What's the actual real first emergency that I've ever had to change my life about? It's this COVID thing. And what saved us during this was the fact that our city was prepared with trails and parks and bike lanes. Had those infrastructure not been available in the beginning in March and April, that was the one thing the city was able to say: go out and enjoy the trails, go out, ride your bike, get outside. That was something that I think was extremely important. And I've also seen a lot of our staff out there, folks, Ira and Emperor are out there all the time. I'm on the trails 3 to 5 times a week. They've been out there working way hard. And Sam, it's weird, the places that I'll run into Sam in the middle of nowhere along the river. He's out there with his staff doing stuff. So the fact that West Sacramento was prepared with some trails and bike infrastructure was great. Had this happened 30 years ago, we would have had a lot less options as a community in order to be able to get outside. So I want to make sure we recognize that we've done some good things. I want to recognize that I certainly made a misjudgment in pushing forward with the reopening, that supporting it so much that YOLO did. And I'm appreciative that we're having these types of conversations on how we can reopen safely. I don't have a lot to add to what's already been discussed. I think that the staff has been making some good decision along with the city council on what makes common sense for us to do. And that seems like the approach that West Sac usually takes, and that we've been taking to this. What is some common sense? The one thing I will say is there is some confusion out there, and I've had some back and forth with Tracy just on what is open and what isn't open. And I think some of that confusion is because we've been very focused on getting the trails nice, cleaning them up, making sure they're safe, and some of the public communication has not been as tight as it maybe could be. I talk to some of my neighbors and friends. Folks aren't exactly sure if parks are open, if you can be there, if you can't be there, what it means to be there. And we've done a lot of great communications, like with the goats and things like that. But I think this has dragged on a lot longer than any of us thought, and maybe redoubling the efforts of just saying, hey, get out there and use the trails. And the parks are open. The dog parks are open, and the parks themselves are open, but just do it in a socially distanced manner. And I think we need to reiterate again, unfortunately, that the play structures are closed, and provide some reasons, again, why they are. And I know it probably feels to the staff that you've said it ad nauseum, but it seems maybe doing a public communications push along the lines of this conversation would be a really good thing. Look, I want to get through this. I want to get this beard off my face. This is a COVID beard. I thought it was going to be about 4 or 5 weeks. I did not know it was going to be 4 or 5 months. So I want us to be healthy. I want us to get through this. And again, thanks for allowing us to participate. Those are, some small comments I have, but really, I think I thank Parks and Rec for the job you've done. To the public health officials, Dr. May, for the job you all have done, very difficult, and to the decision makers in West Sac for trying to keep it all together and implement what the governor and the county has told us we need to do to get through this.
Thank you. Commissioner Jan, you have applause, I see. Yes. I had a few questions myself, and of course, I second all of the commendation of our staff and our decision makers who are keeping us moving forward and in this unpredictable time. As you know, I have a very large interest in environmental preservation and climate change, and and I am a biologist, but I don't think this is the last time that we're going to see something like this, either a resurgence of COVID or something that could, in the future, also arise that would be similar. And so I'm very interested in the lessons learned that we're gathering, not only from a policy and a behavioral aspect, but also with respect to design. We have several processes ongoing, new facilities being planned and getting ready for construction. And so I'm hoping that we're using lessons learned. And since they have such a large interest, the restrooms seem to be one of those places. But I know in the aging and long-term care field that in terms of bathroom design, et cetera, there's the concept of the whole entity being a single floor with the drain in the middle, and essentially you can just walk in and hose the whole thing down. And also the ideas of the touchless facilities in terms of water and flushing, as well as Sam was mentioning the dispensers, whether there's more secure ways to provide some of the things that need to be used to supply the restroom to its maximum sterility. So are we taking note and beginning to look at what we've got on, in design mode and applying some lessons learned to those kinds of activities going forward?
Absolutely. I actually had an opportunity to participate on one of the mayor's committees that focused on design in parks during COVID. This whole pandemic does kind of force you to think about how we design parks. We have a lot of facilities that even if we wanted to physically close them, it'd be very difficult to do that without running a bunch of construction fencing to close off the park. They just aren't designed. It's like taking a great room in your home and you're getting a puppy and trying to figure out, how am I going to contain this puppy in this huge space? And our parks are, they're not really designed to be locked up. We just have a few that have facilities that can be, or even have some more definite boundaries that make it a little bit easier to message areas that might be available or not. So it certainly does inform design. It informs how you space things, how you space age groups. And even as we're looking at updates to the Bright Park Master Plan, there are a lot of reasons to create controlled spaces that go beyond this situation. There are opportunities if you have a softball complex that is fenced off and controlled to better manage it, to help with your maintenance activities, especially when you start to generate tournament interest and being able to control access. There is a lot of ways that you can accomplish multiple objectives with design. So we are certainly thinking about that. We have been researching kind of smart technology restrooms for the past few years, looking to launch a pilot project at Riverwalk Park. But it could be other parks as well, where we have fully automated restrooms that come, after so many uses, the entire facility, a single-use room, is completely cleaned and sanitized. Inventories are controlled. You have a messaging system when inventories get low. It creates a lot of efficiencies. We're still researching those to see how they're actually performing in other jurisdictions, but that's certainly something that would lend itself to some of the sites that tend to be more problematic in terms of maintenance and managing activities in the restrooms.
So I appreciate that. And I think maybe some new technologies are going to also be emerging as we go forward. I have a big interest in not returning to the old normal, but to the new normal, which takes more of these things into consideration. My second question was regarding sort of our boots on the ground type assignment, and what is the protocol, or what do you suggest to the extent that individuals see large gatherings or inappropriate, non-compliance with social distancing and those kinds of things? Is there any kind of mechanism that is set up for the city? I know we haven't been doing hard-headed, enforcement in that regard, but to the extent that some of these behaviors are not socially acceptable, is there some kind of protocol that folks should be aware of?
Yes, we are working through our code enforcement division. So Josh Hurley, who runs that division, is actively involved with our emergency operations center and helping us to manage calls or emails that come in. So complaints can go through our code enforcement division. And there also is enforcement at the county level as well. I will say that with code enforcement and with park activities, what we're finding is that businesses that have maybe aren't following the guidelines, they're not following guidelines on a fairly predictable schedule. Like they have a daily business, you're seeing people every day do things that maybe they're not supposed to do. When you have people in a park, it's kind of one and done. They might show up and do something and then they're gone. And so by the time you get the message, the activity's already happened. And it does make it challenging. Enforcement in parks is probably one of the more challenging things to do because we've got many of them and we try to be out there engaging. And even when we do encounter people, oftentimes we're met with a lot of aggression and people who don't want to leave and don't want to follow the rules. And we do have to call police and seek assistance. That's not what we want to do. We want people to be outside and enjoying our parks. We just want them to follow the rules. So I think education is a really big component. You know, when we first started noticing the parks and placing signage and caution tape up, again, we thought it was going to be for a few weeks. So it's obviously been longer. We may need to explore some different ways that we can message on site. But I would encourage you, if you see activity, to still go through code enforcement. It helps us understand the frequency of uses or things that might be happening that shouldn't be. And then if we're starting to see patterns at specific sites, then we can staff up at those sites to better address it.
And it can also help form your messaging why they shouldn't be doing that. Commissioner Ahmad, you have a comment.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents and took some notes. So sorry if it's a little long. First of all, I wanted to, since you're here, America Baldwin and everyone else, really thank you for your leadership. I am one of those people who's been freaked out by the coronavirus since December, actually, of last year. I was able to, had the fortunate of being able to know what it was early on and being I watch a little bit too much Parks and Rec. And if you ever watch that show, they have that emergency response show and it's all about the bird flu. And so I was like, I'm ready for this. But no, in honesty, I was aware of what this might be. And when it finally did hit our region, I'm so glad that I live in a place where we took it very seriously. Because everywhere else, if you look like I said in other cities, other regions, people were a bit more kind of, la-di-da about it. And it gave me a lot of comfort having young children and that things were better in West Sacramento. So thank you for that. And the park staff closing off the play structures, as hard as it is for my 4 kids, it's so important. And it also reinforces to them when we do go out, because we do go out, we walk, we take bike rides, that this is still happening, and this is something hasn't gone away, and it won't go away until you see those caution tapes are completely gone or whatever. Even if they are gone, I'm like, okay, still you can't touch it. But I had some questions regarding the bathroom usage. I agree with the analysis of Dr. May and everyone else that if we do open bathrooms, we have to clean them more. But I understand Sam's point that cleaning is difficult, and maintaining staff to clean those bathrooms is difficult. So I was wondering if there could be creative solutions to maybe opening up the large bathrooms and then maybe alternating and saying well, this week we'll open up the smaller bathrooms or something, so that there's just more bathrooms available throughout the city. I know that's a little bit confusing, but that's just something I wanted to throw out there. That if we can get creative about how to offer restrooms for people to use, because I live in the Westfield neighborhood, and I can tell you it's a large park without a bathroom. And over the years, we have found human fecal matter throughout the park because it gets a lot of people on the Sycamore Trail, as Commissioner Harger was sitting in front of this virtual background. I love that trail, I love that park, but it's gross. I have to often analyze what kind of stuff I'm looking at when my kids are playing out there, because I don't know if it's human or animal. So it's real. We need to have bathrooms for people to use. And so if we can get creative, great. Obviously, I would like to see I would love to shut down until things are better, but I know that's not realistic either. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And with my question regarding the open fields, this is something, I know we mentioned basketball is like high contact and therefore it shouldn't be happening. But like, what about soccer? Because my son's team, he's no longer playing with them and they're not having tournaments, but he was on a comp team and they were still continuing practices. His team was. And as far as I know, they haven't had any issues, but I was wondering if that is something that the city's looking at that can continue on, because I know that's provided an outlet for a lot of those kids to be able to play and get their energy out. Especially, I mean, I know it's hard with the smoke and everything, but I think they've tried to be good about it. I think they had one incident, for instance, with my son's team, where they had a player's sister test positive for COVID, and she sat out for the entire month just to avoid being in contact with other kids. So I just had a question about that. And then I was also, I know we mentioned tennis is like a great low contact sport, but I know that from our parks master plan analysis that we are severely lacking in tennis courts in West Sacramento. And so I was wondering if there's a way to kind of provide people with an opportunity to play tennis, but since we lack tennis courts, how we could do that. I know there's a few apartment complexes and such that have them, but I just wanted to kind of find out if that had been thought about, like if there's a way to get people playing and engaging in some kind of sport, but obviously we lack some of those facilities. And then finally, I was just wondering, kind of like, again, as a parent, if there have been thoughts, there's been some thought given to doing creative things to provide recreation for families. Like, could we use Rayleigh Field's parking lot as an outdoor movie arena to do like a movie night with the cars? Like what's it called, like a drive-in or something? Is that something we could do as a city to provide people to have an outlet for socializing without obviously mingling? Because I understand there's the risk of bringing people together. You risk people talking or whatever. And I'm sure that will happen even in cars, but at least it just minimizes that risk. So I know during the summer, there was like an app-based scavenger hunt that I think has happened for a couple of years, only in the summer, I think. But if we could do more of that in the fall to encourage people to be outside, and for kids and families to get together and get outside. Because it's hard. Like I have kids ages from 12 to 1.5, and they want to go outside. They want to do stuff, and you can only do so much of like biking and playing in the front yard or going for walks. So I can only imagine like people are just going stir crazy, trying to think of ways. And there's low-income families that don't have that opportunities to, like I'm blessed and I'm privileged that I have that to offer my kids. Not everybody does. And then, so I'm just throwing all my questions out there because I didn't have a chance to talk. So, and then I want to just piggyback off of what Commissioner Hargrove said about communication. And I completely agree with what he said about the city communicating with people. Because as information is developing constantly, I understand like you all are kind of keeping up to date with the latest in medical developments and epidemiological, developments, and you have to kind of change protocol also. For instance, every week I really religiously watch the Yolo County daily briefings, and those are a great way for me as a busy person to just turn on my phone and watch what's happening. I don't understand that West Sac probably can't do those daily, but maybe like monthly or something. You can just do a quick video and we can share it with the community and just says like, hey, like this month, for instance, this is available. Playgrounds are still shut down, but Black Swim is open, etc. I think that would be an easy and probably like no cost way of communicating with people at large, and you can change that video as needed. So that's all. Those are my questions, and whoever can answer them, great. But overall, I know this is unprecedented what we're doing, and there's no easy answer. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just kind of like trying to, by the seat of our pants, trying to figure out what to do. So I hope that things will change for the better. As Babs mentioned, like I'm always hoping that the statistics will show that we are on the mend, but so far it hasn't looked that way. So I hope we can work out and make things tolerable for everybody. Thank you.
Tracy, can you talk about the soccer and some of the other questions that Commissioner Ahmad raised?
Absolutely. I may ask Dr. May to kind of weigh in a little bit in terms of soccer. Teams are not supposed to be practicing right now. Conditioning can occur. So that's different than a team practice. No teams, regardless of the activity, unless it's one that's been clearly identified as being very low risk, such as tennis, are supposed to be practicing. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more, Dr. May. But.
Yeah, I think, there is youth sports guidance. And right now, especially if you think about it, we're in the, I'm not even talking about the city. It is true that still many of the cases in the county are coming from West Sacramento and Woodland. However, as counties under the state, guidance, we're, looking at entire counties. So I recognize there's different risk in different places, but there is a youth sports guidance, and right now it doesn't allow for that. It has to be conditioning with physical distancing. So, could you get a team together? They would not be able to play against each other, if that makes sense. They would have to be physically distanced, doing their own thing, in their own space. So we do recognize, the balance of, needing, I'm just going to be quite frank, my personal opinion. I don't think COVID is going anywhere anytime soon. We're still in a hot spot. We're looking like we're declining, because of some of the measures we're taking. We are nervous because schools, some schools are going to be reopening. The university, is reopening. We're seeing what's going around across the country. We now know that, that the American Academy of Pediatrics has been tracking cases, and the cases are rising faster in children and adolescents than in other groups in the public. And so, my suspicion is that, we're kind of at the edge of that purple tier, where if we could stay, around where we are, just below, over 2 weeks, that we would be able to get into the red tier and perhaps allow some more opportunities, although the local health ordinances can always be stricter than what the state recommends. But I'm afraid that we're going to be stuck in that strictest tier for a while, as we, slowly kind of reopen. So I think, that's one point, is that, I think people are fed up. There is a real quarantine fatigue is a real thing. People have to make their own risk-based decisions. I'm a little disheartened that the state hasn't put out more guidance, both for some of these activities, as well as for people to be able to make their own decisions. Technically we're still in a stay-at-home order. And I think that's unfortunate because, that is driving people indoors into social gatherings, and that's where we're seeing most, aside from essential workers, that's where we're seeing most of our outbreaks is due to social gatherings. And, obviously the parks, is it safer to be in the parks than it is, to be in people's houses? Obviously, we have a duty to our citizens to do, to make recommendations for safety. But I just want to highlight that this is going to be an ongoing issue. So anything we can do to think outside the box, to come up with guidance so that people can make decisions, that are safe. And then also so we can address, as the mayor mentioned, some of the health inequity issues that we're having. A lot of the folks that are at most risk for COVID, are essential workers. We definitely have socioeconomic disparities, ethnicity and race disparities. These are all the same populations that are also at risk, for wildfires and living in multi-generational households and being essential workers and, more likely to get COVID and also more likely to suffer, the other impacts that we're seeing. So I think it is a balancing act, and we can just look at the science and try to make the best evidence-based decisions, but the reality is that that's constantly changing. There are some good things on the horizon. More opportunities for testing capacity. We're hoping to, basically, in order to meet the health equity metrics for the state, it's giving us a big incentive now. We really need to focus more on our vulnerable populations and to focus more where the cases are. Right now our testing site is at the Davis Senior Center, which doesn't make a lot of sense because that's where we have the fewest cases. So we're trying to go out into the areas that need more assistance. But I think it is going to require some thinking, and also, cognitively, kind of working with behavior change, it is going to be difficult. People are going to do things that, they're just not going to tolerate, this length of time. So I think there are ways to safely, do this. Right now, we're in the most restrictive tier. So like most of this is not on the table anyway for our county. But as, we kind of progress, we're going to have to be really careful. And I think, this fall is going to be a rough one because we're going to have the schools and the university, and then we're going to have the flu season. So I think it's just going to be a continued challenge, and anything, I think outdoor activity, anything we can do to get people outdoors is really critical. So, I just want to say that I think you guys are doing a great job, and I'm glad to see that people are taking this really seriously. As an emergency physician, I've certainly seen enough patients with COVID to know it is a serious disease. I think that the pressure will come from the public, in order to be able to do some of the things that, that they were doing previously. But, the messaging is really going to have to be, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I don't think people still, even my own colleagues, people still don't get that. They're in denial about it. And the more we can slowly introduce them to the concept while allowing people to, perhaps do some activities. But I don't think any of this stuff is going to be on the table, frankly, for the coming weeks, just because of where we are within the pandemic. I'm not sure I answered anybody's questions.
Commissioner Hargrove.
So this isn't PERC specific, but this is related to what Dr. May just explained. You seem to be saying we're going to be in the governor's purple tier 1 for longer than 3 weeks. Is that your guess? Is that your personal opinion?
So we would need to meet the criteria for the red tier in order to get out of the purple tier for 2 weeks. I don't think we're going to meet. We haven't quite met that yet. Then you have to stay in that tier for 2 weeks, or you can potentially reverse. My concern is so it would be a minimum of 4 to 5 weeks, no matter what, even if the data looked really good. But my concern is, as we're opening a few schools, and as we're, we're just in Yolo County, we're just going to see, and we have university students, frankly, coming back. So I think we're just going to be in there for a few more weeks.
Is UC Davis, are they on campus, students coming back?
They're in distance learning, except for very small select number of classes that can be in person because they have to be. They have significantly reduced, students coming back, but there are still students coming back and doing distance learning in the community, like not in their own communities, but coming back to Davis. So we're just gonna have to watch that kind of closely, as we've seen with other universities and schools. Frankly, we're learning more about children and COVID. There's no reason to believe that they can't transmit COVID. I think we'll get more data coming soon. There's more and more data coming about that, especially the older children. So yeah, it's just I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just guessing. Really, it's an educated guess that it's going to be at least 5 weeks in this category. Maybe we'll be lucky and we'll get out of it, but maintaining in that red tier is going to be difficult, just because there are two main metrics. One is case counts, so 7 new daily cases per day per 100,000 population. We're not even quite there yet. We're at 7.3. And then the other is test positivity rates, which we do meet that metric, but you end up in the most restrictive metric. So even if your test positivity is good, if your case counts aren't, then you'll end up in the more restrictive category. And then you have to stay in that category for a period of time, and you can go backwards. So I think the governor is being very cautious. The metrics still do seem a little bit arbitrary. There's not a lot of science to support any of this. But I do think, we're going to be in a somewhat restricted state, probably through the fall season. Whether we can get into that red tier, and open a few more things, I'm not sure.
Commissioner Ahmad.
Dr. May, I just had a question about testing. I had read something about UC Davis. They're increasing their capacity for testing possibly by the end of September with like a new machine they'd ordered. Do you foresee that changing things a little bit if their testing capacity increases?
Yeah, I think, they are working to increase their test capacity. They have a pretty solid reopening plan. They probably won't have that ability until because they have to validate the test. They just got the instrument. They have to validate the test. They're going to do that in their the residence halls first before they can roll it out to the rest of the students. And so I think they were estimating as early as October 1, but it's hard to know with the paperwork for the CDPH and timelines. It could be October 15, and then students will have been on campus for a month. So there's no reason to believe that, that any of us have any magic bullet, in terms of testing. I am heartened that the state did partner with PERC and Elmer, so we can have faster turnaround times. I do know our public health lab is getting the instruments, and so I think we can locally increase testing capacity. Whether we can keep up with outbreaks if they occur, I think is another question. But I think everyone's doing the best they can and being the most cautious that they can given the circumstances. But yes, we do have concerns about reopening.
Yeah, I want to just add, because I think to thank Dr. May and her colleagues that Yolo County has been, under challenging circumstances, has been a very good partner on the testing issues and understanding these questions. But I do think it's important, and I think most of the commission knows I've been participating in the national task force on this question too. But just as to put us in context, we're already in the reopening strategy that was assumed widespread, universal, regular, frequent testing. So if we were to achieve even a bit more testing or a lot more testing, all we'll be doing is getting to the place we thought we were going to be when we made these decisions in June. So I wouldn't think that adding a whole lot more even a lot more testing is going to give us the ability to at this point to make even further decisions along that trajectory. So just as a cautionary tale in that regard, because our ability to detect is based on that testing regime that we had hoped to be able to achieve. When the governor, last week at the end of the week, the governor releases the new framework, and we appear, as Commissioner Hargrove said, we appear in YOLO in the most risky tier, the widespread risk tier. You couldn't be worse than that tier. Now, with an important caveat that most of California is in that tier. But if you look at the news reports from local papers, if you look at our own posts on social media, or even actually from the city and from the county, they're all about hair salons have opened, right? The fact that there was just a new dashboard released and a new system of accounting for risk that placed us at the highest level of risk was not even part of the story in most of those cases. It was simply that, okay, look, good news, hair salons are open. And I think that's an example of sort of our role as community leaders and communicators about where these small differences in how we convey information and how we characterize the information that's occurring does affect behavior. And I think earlier someone, maybe it was also Commissioner Hargrove, who said, when they said, they're closing the parks altogether. This is serious. And in fact, that was one of the reasons for those decisions at that point, was to convey the utter seriousness of the situation. Not that we were experiencing, widespread outbreaks in every park the day before that, but the signal that was sent and that was received largely during April and May was that this must be serious if they're telling us that we cannot use these open parks. And so these are the trade-offs. You've identified them well as a commission. The thoughtfulness of your assessment of the challenges and the questions that have been raised here, some of the suggestions and ideas, I know I really appreciate it. I'm sure Member Pro Tem Sandine as well, because there are, as Commissioner Ahmad said, there's no right answer. There are actually quite a few wrong answers, and we've seen that in other places and other times. And so the best that we can do is to manage day to day and learn, pay attention to the data, pay attention to our real on the ground experience, and then make those adjustments as needed, recognizing that none of us are infallible, and that we're going to learn from one another. And we just have to keep that spirit that most of you have expressed around. We gotta beat this thing into the ground to the maximum extent possible. But again, our partnership with Yolo County and with the public health officer and with Dr. May and her predecessor has really been outstanding. And I think it's one of the reasons why even during the period of the big ramp up in cases that Commissioner Hargrove noted that was serious, that at least we were no longer at the front of the line in the county, and that we were seeing behavioral changes. We were seeing the kinds of adaptation and actions that need to be taken in the community. So we know we can. We know we're capable of doing it as a city. And it just takes, to some extent, the right policies, and to a large extent, the right leadership by all of you. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Commissioner Jans.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor the point. I just had a quick comment and a brief question. Hearing everybody's input, I think we all agree that there's no way to control people and their actions. We can do as much communication as we can. Aside from fortifying the restricted areas, people are going to demand entry, or they're going to be belligerent, or they're going to make poor choices no matter how much we try to keep them from doing that. And especially since the topic has become somewhat political and further polarizing, people are now, making even more poor choices for even wrong reasons. So I commend everybody for what they're doing, because these aren't easy decisions to make. I think we all want this to be over with as soon as possible, but if there's any small, to my point earlier, if there's any small things that we can do judiciously to help people get out and become more active, or at least make their experience outside among these wonderful trails, among these wonderful parks, a little bit more enjoyable, then I would certainly hope that we could do everything we could to make that happen, considering all the things that we talked about. So again, I appreciate everything everybody's doing. I know these choices aren't easy to make, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide my input as a parent and a community member and a supporter of our great city. The one thing I wanted to just maybe ask, and I'm sure it's probably being considered, but I know my young son is pretty stoked about it. Next month, it's his birthday, but it's also Halloween. And I haven't heard much about what sort of plans or recommendations might be for trick-or-treating. I mean, I imagine it's probably not going to happen, but maybe from a parks or a city standpoint, we can, like I said earlier, find ways to maybe modify something that we would typically do. It may not be the traditional way that we do things, but maybe we can be creative and find some way to at least let kids dress up and maybe enjoy the holiday for those who want to celebrate it in a safe way. I think that would be something that might not only be fun to enjoy, but maybe also spark a little bit of motivation or positivity and a normality to the 2020 year that's been anything but. So I just didn't know if that was being considered, and if it hadn't, then to maybe just kind of throw it out there on the table to see what wonderful ideas our great city staff can maybe kind of come together and create. And I'm happy to provide input on that as well, or help out any way that I can. But I just kind of wanted to throw that in there because it is coming fairly soon, in the next 60 days or so.
Commissioner Ahmad, did you have a comment on this?
I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Jan said. As I mentioned, the parent of young children also, I have the same sentiment. And I would love to hear whatever ideas the city staff are working on. And I'd love to also provide input or feedback and regarding Halloween or whatever. So I just wanted to echo my support for that.
Thank you. If there are there any further comments?
Can I just say one more thing I mentioned, which is respect to our staff in the department, who are they are, as you've all said, doing a yo person's job, if that's such a thing. And we, unlike the city of Sacramento, we're one of the rest of the thousands of cities in America that have received almost no support for COVID from the federal government. We did just finally get our allocation, and it's almost all spent already on the basic emergency services that we've been expending on for food distributions and the food and security and some of the activities that Tracy has described. As you can imagine, we anticipate significant hits to the city's sales tax revenue, potentially to property tax revenue. We're already seeing a spike beginning in property tax appeals as an example, and the city's other revenue sources. And the United States Senate has failed to take up any action whatsoever on the pending legislation that would provide support to all the other cities that aren't the 25 biggest in America. So we are, West Sacramento has been very solidly managed in terms of its fiscal situation, but those are not trivial potential hits to the city's budget. So as our focus at the moment is mainly on those items that are around protecting the safety of the community, and in particular with respect to COVID, for a lot of the reasons that have been mentioned tonight, but to make sure that we're able to advance as quickly as possible towards solving the number one problem that we're hearing from families, which is around school. And when we get it wrong, when we take actions that cause folks to relax or that allow for the virus to be transmitted and cases rise, it further delays the ability of the school system to return into any sort of hybrid instruction for the large majority of its students. And so we're really trying to focus as a city on sort of the big picture issues of evictions and unemployment, and then with respect to family situations and young people, really making sure that we're doing everything possible to meet those, not just meet the metrics and change colors, but solve the underlying health and exposure risks so that the school district can safely make choices that will allow for parents to return to work and to achieve some level of normality in their day-to-day lives. So I mentioned that just so your expectation levels of what Tracy is able to deliver each time that you meet in terms of new programs and new initiatives. She will. The department has been extraordinarily creative with the after-school program as a way to provide support for parents who are engaged in distance learning, and lots of other changes, and you've heard about others as well. Our staff is working under some very difficult situations, and our ability to know even what our fiscal situation for additional initiatives might be that's going to be fairly cloudy for the next several months as we wait for some of these tax revenue sources to show themselves.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, I want to thank our fabulous staff, who we all appreciate, and give my personal thanks to our Commission Clerk, Katie Dick, who's held my hand through this, and to our presenters, Director Michael and Dr. May. Thank you for enlightening us and engaging in this conversation, and to our Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem for joining us. And I will be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, Tracy, did you have a comment?
I did just want to say one thing. Thank you, everyone, for your input. Our department has really creative staff. We've been pivoting on a daily basis since mid-March. And one thing that we have been doing and doing very well is virtual programming. And we realize that that's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's something that we're going to have to continue to grow. And I think with some of the feedback we've gotten from you today, there's an opportunity for us to look at ways that we can virtually expand some of our offerings and do that within the resources that we have available to do that. And I just really appreciate the time, and thank you so much, Dr. May and Mayor Cabaldon, Mayor Pro Tem Sandine, for joining us. We look forward to the next commission meeting that will be in early October, so there will be time for us to talk about some other opportunities, including some creative ways we might be able to help with Halloween. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
And a second?
Second.
Would you call the roll, Commission Clerk?
Thank you. Vice Chair Reed?
Aye.
And Commissioner Price?
Aye.
Commissioner Jans?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See you next time.
Aye, thank you.